And so we come to the final video in the top 100 games of the decade countdown as chosen by Bob the Pet Ferret. So we've had 90 games to get to this point, and feel free to go back and look through all of the stuff that I've picked, but we still have 10 more to go, and these are the games that just really stood out to me in the last decade as being just phenomenal games that I feel deserve the spotlight. Feel free to let me know your comments on what I think is great, but be respectful, of course, and let me know your choices for the games of the decade, as always. But yeah, I'm sure you want to know what my top 10 is, don't you? Well, we should probably get started on that, shall we? Uncharted: The Lost Legacy is the greatest Tomb Raider game of the decade, and Crystal Dynamics need to take note. The main reason being is Chloe. Chloe, of course, was a side character in the Uncharted series, and they decided to do originally it was supposed to be a DLC, it ended up being a full game, so they made Chloe the protagonist, so you control her, and so you've got this sassy Australian going around solving puzzles, exploring these uncharted lands, and it's so much more Tomb Raider than what I've been getting out of Tomb Raider. And I know I keep picking on Tomb Raider, but everything about Lost Legacy reminded me of what I loved about the Tomb Raider series, but at the same time, in its own right, I felt that Lost Legacy took the series in exactly the direction it should have gone after Uncharted 4. My concern when they revealed Lost Legacy was the idea that if they want to continue the series, they might end up invalidating what was a really nice conclusion to Uncharted 4. With The Lost Legacy, they let that conclusion be and went, here's a popular character from the series, you're this character now, and it's still just Uncharted, and it's so good. There's some really good open level design that doesn't get obnoxious, it doesn't feel bloated, it doesn't feel like they've put too much in. In fact, the game as a whole is quite short, so it really doesn't outstay its welcome, but I really would love to see more of this kind of Uncharted game, where you've got these hub areas where you can explore, and I feel like just having Chloe go off on her own adventures in Uncharted 5 would be the correct direction to take the series, and I'm totally on board for that. So previously I had stated that Little Big Planet is what it's like inside my head. It's not fully what it's like inside my head. If you want to find out what the rest of my head feels like, then Control is a pretty good answer. Control came out in 2019. It came out right before the decade ended, but it has snuck its way into the games of the decade, top 10 no less, for the simple fact that everything about this game appeals to me specifically. So it is government conspiracies and supernatural elements and weird objects of phenomenal power that we can never truly know. It is the best SCP game. In fact, it's the only game that's captured that, and it doesn't even use the SCP Foundation name. Everything about Control is weird, bizarre, makes no goddamn sense, but I am 100% on board with this bizarre rollercoaster ride of a game. You have just brilliant art design with the stark, brutalist architecture. It just gets shifted around in all these weird shapes, and you've got like splashes of colour here and there, like you've got like plants in some areas, or you've got like the hiss effect in some areas, so it turns bright red. So just it's visually striking. Being able to fly around and move around this world, throwing around powers and stuff, is great, and you've just got so many little cool world building bits that just remind me of the SCP Foundation and walk that line between terrifying and hilarious in equal measure. One of the first memos you find in the game describes a shark materializing in a room, and the moment I saw that I knew exactly what I was in for, and I was totally on board. Control has just left an impression on me that I cannot shake, and I love this game so much. So I mentioned about Dishonored and this weird world that it occupies and the really interesting emergent gameplay that comes out of it with the various different options of how you can approach a level. Dishonored 2 takes all that formula and it really builds on it in a way that I absolutely fell in love with. You have got more focus on the weirder aspects of this world. You've got some really, really good levels that lean into just how off-kilter this world is. So you've got the Clockwork Mansion, which is so imaginative, and you've got a type of enemy in there that's so unlike the rest of the game that it forces you to make new decisions and change up your playstyle just to try and deal with them. And it's so good. It's so good that they've thrown that in there. You've got the mansion where you are flipping back and forth between the present and the past, which messes with your head so much that you've got this level within a level and you can flip between them, and it's so well designed and so brilliantly put together. But also I really liked the fact that it focused on Emily, who was a child in the first game and is now grown up in the second, and it focuses on her and it adds a really new dimension to the story. It builds on the world even more just by you playing someone who is in charge of it. And yeah, Dishonored 2, just absolutely brilliant game with so much imagination and with just so many options to play the game, and I adore it. I absolutely love the Portal games. This is not a controversial opinion. The internet loves Portal. We know this. We know this already. Portal 2 just took what made Portal 1 so good and it just built on it, which is a common theme with a lot of the sequels I'm really loving in this countdown. You might notice the things that made Portal what they were, aside from like the really interesting puzzle gameplay, was the black humour that came out of GLaDOS. They've ramped it up in Portal 2, because it's not just GLaDOS now. You've got Wheatley and you've got Cave Johnson in his pre-recorded messages in like the old Aperture Science. Just all of that just really built on it and added new layers to the humour that weren't there before. And I like the fact that they turned like a couple of throwaway gags from the first game into just running gags in the second, particularly with GLaDOS mocking your weight and the fact that you were adopted. It's also things like the historical section of Aperture Science where you kind of move through the history of the organisation. So you start in like this dilapidated 50s office, and then it moves through the 60s and the 80s and all this kind of stuff. And you've got pre-recorded messages from Cave Johnson, who is expertly performed by J.K. Simmons, just gradually losing his mind. And they've really expanded on the puzzle gameplay as well, which just, you'd already taken the writing, which was really good, and improved on that. And then you took this gameplay that's already really good and you've made that even better as well, with things like the light bridges and the gels and just the way all that combines together to make just this really, really memorable experience. And I really hope there's a Portal 3 someday, because I know Valve hate the number 3, but I want more of this in my life yesterday. Speaking of sequels that build on the first game again, hey, it's Gravity Rush 2. So again, I loved the world of Gravity Rush and just absolutely adored it. Well, now if you take those sort of slightly condensed Vita graphics and you expand them out and put them in full HD and make it as vibrant, as beautiful as possible, now I'm even more in love with the world. And they've added more to the world as well, as now you've got completely new section which has got like a marketplace and an area for the poor and all this, and it's still this floating civilization that makes no goddamn sense, but it's really interesting, it's really cool. The story's a huge improvement as well. Like, the first game felt a bit disjointed at times, but the second game, just, it feels like it's like this is an episode of a cartoon or a comic issue, and then like that's that story done, and now we've got the next episode. And the fact that it also answers a lot of the prevailing questions that the first game set up and didn't really go anywhere with, and the fact that we get those answers in the second one is pretty cool. The gravity powers, the fact that you've got the different, you've got the Jupiter and the, I can't remember the light one, but you've got the two variants on Cat's powers, which will make her lighter or heavier depending on which one you're using, and they really kind of shapes up the gameplay. It really adds more to it that was already great. And yeah, it's one of those things where you take something that was already really amazing, and you just build on it and make it even better and more beautiful, and just it's just good. It's just good, so good. And I have no idea if we're ever going to get Gravity Rush 3, but I really hope that we do. It's not exactly controversial to say that The Last of Us is brilliant, because The Last of Us is brilliant. It is easily one of the most heart-wrenching games of the decade. It is a milestone of video game storytelling. It's taken what is essentially just a generic zombie plague narrative, but within that there's a real human relationship at the center of it, and the way that Joel and Ellie interact with each other, it all plays out in a natural way. They're not good people, especially Joel, and the game never lets you forget that, but that's fine, that's good. That's part of what makes it so good, is that you're supposed to question the main character, the character you're playing. People talk about how great the story is and how great the performances are, but what tends to get overlooked is the gameplay, which takes some getting used to, but once you sort of get the flow of it, and once you get exactly what's going on, you realise that the gameplay feels a little bit clunky and feels a little bit like it's working against you sometimes. It's the feeling of surviving and struggling. So the idea that you can't just run into a room guns blazing because like a single shot will just cause you to reel backwards. Like, the moment that happened, I realised what was going on, and I was like, this gameplay makes perfect sense with this setting, and just the fact that you can set up encounters so you can just kind of sneak through, you don't have to engage. The Last of Us is a really masterful game that redefines video game storytelling, but also just weaves that into its gameplay in a really effective way. Like many other people, I'm going to say The Last of Us, absolutely fantastic game that deserves to be recognised as one of the best of the decade. Marvel made the claim that Avengers Infinity War was the greatest crossover. Well, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate laughs in the face of that claim, because every video game in the world is crammed into Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and I have no idea how they do it. There are so many characters representing so many franchises, not just Nintendo. You've got Metal Gear in there, you've got Persona in there now, you've got Mega Man, Sonic, Pac-Man, all of that. It's all in there, and it's all great, and it's all amazing. And it's not just the crossover elements though, it is the fact that the gameplay has been refined in this 5th Smash Bros. Game to such a degree that almost every character just feels fun to just pick up and play, because usually Some feel a bit sluggish and feel a bit rubbish, but the much speedier gameplay of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate just kind of makes everyone feel a bit snappy and a bit interesting. And while characters do feel distinct, apart from where they are literally clones, it's the fact that every character can still feel fun because of that just snappiness of the game. But it also builds on that with things like the adventure mode, which has all the spirit fights that are just so endlessly inventive, but also really nostalgic as well, as you're just sitting there trying to figure out, so why did they pick this character to represent this character, and why this stage, and why these items, and yeah, it's so good and so expansive. And again, it's one of those where I just cannot stop playing. It came out tail end of 2018, and I keep going back to it, even if it's just for like a match or two during the day. I will just play it. I keep coming back to it because I just keep wanting to play this game. It is so good, and Sakurai has done an amazing job, and Lord knows where the series goes from here, but the fact that this game exists is just phenomenal. So you'll notice when I talked about Yakuza 5, I didn't really bring up Zero very much. That's because, like, well, Yakuza 0 is absolutely amazing and easily the greatest game in the series. It's also the game that properly got me into Yakuza. While I played Yakuza 5 for free on PlayStation Plus, I didn't really play much of it. I played what you saw in a video of it, but the first game I sat down and played was Yakuza 0 because it seemed like a good jump-in point, because you didn't need to understand anything about the series up to this point in order to enjoy it. And oh my god, there has never been a game this full of style and brilliance. Part of that is the 80s setting, which makes everything just neon and in your face. This feels like the team just went all out. Having played some of the other ones, I can see what they were going for, but with Zero, they just ramped it all up. They used that 80s setting to its full advantage. You've got some hilarious side stories. You've got training a dominatrix to actually be dominating. You've got Miracle Johnson, who is totally not Michael Jackson. You've got the Cabaret Club, which is actually the real game, I swear to God, because I got hooked into the Cabaret Club management game and never left for like several weeks, and then was like, oh wait, there's another game here, isn't there? Okay. Speaking of which, you playing as Majima. Majima is an amazing character. He's always been an amazing character. Now I know, having gone back and played other games in the series. But the fact that in this he's playable and he can breakdance as part of his moves, it's just brilliant. I absolutely love Yakuza 0 in every way, and I want everyone to play this game so that we can all screech at each other at how good it is. Aha, I bet you were wondering when I was talking about The Lost Legacy and I've mentioned Uncharted 4, you might be thinking, well, where's Uncharted 4? You haven't talked about that. It's number 2 because it's so good. I'm a huge fan of the Uncharted series. I like high adventure with mythical elements to it. I love all that. You know, I love the pulp adventures. But yeah, what Uncharted 4 does, it takes all the good elements of the series and it refines everything. The combat mechanics are less clunky than they have been in the past. They've really refined those, made them really satisfying. The stealth mechanics have been given a new focus as well, so you can just bypass entire encounters just by stealthing through them, and the fact that they've got that as an option makes the game feel less like you're just kind of going along with the roller coaster ride. It actually makes you feel more in control of what Nate's doing, and the character writing is so good in this one. They built in a very real relationship into this storyline, Nate and Elena, and how the adventuring takes a toll on their relationship and the way that they interact with each other, the way they try and work through it. It's so real and it's so well done, and I absolutely adore it for that more than anything else, to be perfectly honest with you. But the fact that they've got the refined mechanics on top of that, plus just the usual beautiful scenery and really interesting locations, puzzles feel a lot more fun this time around, and just it really is like we built up to this moment, and when it ended it was very bittersweet. I didn't really want to say goodbye to these characters, but at the same time I was happy with the conclusion that they were given. And yeah, Uncharted 4 just really left a really strong impression on me, and it's my second best game of the decade. But what is number one?
Show me your true form!
So, you probably saw this coming. Not least because it was in the intro and it hasn't showed up at this point. But if you've paid any attention to me from the past few years since this game came out, I've kind of been quite obsessed with this. When Joker got announced for Smash Brothers, I was like, oh my god, yes, this is amazing. This is the best character announcement, which is why I haven't been disappointed with a lot of the DLC announcements with that game, because I'm like, well, I got Joker right at the gate, so I can't exactly complain. But anyway, Persona 5 is what happens when Style and Substance violently collaborate to make just brilliance. At its core, it's a Persona game. I enjoyed Persona 4, it's one of my favourite games as well. Persona 3 I also enjoyed, not quite one of my favourite games though. But what it does is it ramps up the style, and it ramps up why you're doing things so much more. So where it improves on things, so you are a high school student who finds access to the shadow world, and you have to go in and you use it to take down authority figures who are evil or misguided and plagued by shadows. And it's basically sticking it to the man all the way through, and the layers that you go through throughout the game, it just escalates with each target that you have. But it's the fact that things like social links, which are now called confidants, they matter a little bit more. Like, they enhance the amount of things that you can do in battle. They have excellent character interactions. Your party members are all really cool. It's provided me with just an endless font of memes with Morgana and him constantly telling you to go to sleep. And dungeon exploration is so much more improved by having like properly designed dungeons rather than procedurally generated ones. The battle mechanics are also improved. Like, everything is just stylish as well. Like, they've thrown so much style into this game. The music, the presentation, the visuals, it's all just phenomenal. And this took over my life for a full year. I was basically playing it in real time, so like every day in the game was like I would play on the actual day kind of thing. So I'd run with it, and just everything about Persona 5 just ticked all the boxes. And I don't think I've played a game in this decade that I've latched onto as much as this one, and I absolutely adore Persona 5. It is my game of the decade. And indeed, that's the end of the series. That is my full top 100 games of the decade. I hope that you have enjoyed this trip through my amazing / bizarre taste. And yeah, I want to know what you think. I want to know what if you agree with my choices, if you think that I'm completely off base with everything that I've said, or let me know what games you would consider to be the best games of the decade. This took a lot of work to put all this together, by the way. I'm not doing this again. Well, maybe in 10 years. Funny. Anyway, thank you for joining me on this wild adventure. Let me know, again, what you thought down below, and share your favourites as well. And I will see you again very soon with something, I don't know, something. The channel will keep going, we'll have more content soon. And thank you for following me through this, and I will see you again very shortly.